What's up YouTube, Dale here from Zephyr, and today I am bringing you a very spicy concoction that I have been cooking up. Today it is the turn of Dracotail Tearlaments. Now what I've been able to do as I've worked through a couple of the kinks for the day is I kind of felt that what you were doing when you were using your Feymana during your opponent's turn, you were working your way into the Arfulion. But then I also felt that once you got there, your Arfulion doesn't really do a lot more while it's on the field. So with the added benefit of being able to utilize a Tearlaments monster's effect, you can turn that Arfulion into a Protoplant Dracotail. If that wasn't enough, we are also playing King of the Swamp in the main deck. The added benefit of something like that is because not only can the normal combo when you utilize Feymana plus the King of the Swamp get you into a Red Eyes Dark Dragoon, but you can also then have the option of being able to get into a Tearlaments Rukalos, which just gives you another layer of disruption all in turn 0, which is absolutely crazy from the exact same materials that you were using anyway. The other added benefit is that the Tearlaments aren't that dominating in the entire main deck, and it really is just kind of like a free card hand trap engine that works in your favor. So with all of that out of the way, please smash that like button, hit that notification bell and subscribe so you miss out on any more upcoming content. I'll take you through the list, explain what we've got, talk you through why we've got it and some of the other changes that you might want to consider making depending on your playstyle. So starting off with the Dracotail cards, this lineup's going to be pretty staple for all Dracotail lists that you're going to be seeing, and we are going to be maxing out on the Dracotail Feymana. So this is your during the main phase quick effect, discard it to then fusion summon into a spellcaster or into a dragon. All of the Dracotail monsters have the exact same effect that if they're sent to the graveyard, well specifically the main deck Dracotails to be precise, have the ability that if they're sent to the graveyard for fusion material, you get to set a Dracotail spell or trap directly from the deck. Then we have your ideal starter in the form of the Dracotail Lucias. This one on normal or special gives you the ability to then search out a Dracotail monster, which more times than not will be the Feymana. And then if you already have access to the Feymana, you're probably going to be going down for your Pan or your Urgula. The next one that we're maxing out on is going to be the Dracotail Mululu. This is going to be your other starter of the deck. Now, this is one of the ones that I've always played around with playing it at 2 and playing it at 3. I'm now kind of more confident at playing it at 3 because the added benefit of something like this when it is used as fusion material has an added effect that it non-targets negates a monster on the field permanently, which is really, really important because if your opponent has a card that is trying to work its way into another combo piece, or if it's a card that is trying to interrupt with you during your turn, something like a Yummy Snatchy, you could choose the Mululu to either bait it out or just negate it permanently, which is really, really helpful. On top of that as well, this is a dragon effect monster and a dark monster, so that's how you're going to be able to work your way into being able to utilize stuff like your Red Eyes Dark Dragoon, but also be able to access some of your other monsters if you go down that route. One card I would consider if you did want to cut this down to 2 is that's where I'd put the Shadow engine back in, and that's where you'd probably be looking at the base minimum of like 3 Shadow beasts or 2 beasts, 1 Hedgehog, entirely up to you. The biggest benefit of doing something like that is in the exact same scenario that I mentioned previously, if you're able to activate your Feymana, you could go Feymana and go into a Shadow Winder and then utilize your Tearlaments monsters effect in the graveyard to then add a Rukalos to that, or to then add a Dracotail to that if you wanted to. So you've got ways of being able to kind of add more to your field depending on what you have in your hand. For the final Dracotail monsters, we are on the 1 Urgula and the 1 Pan. Now, I know in a pure version, a lot of people are bumping the Pan up to 2 to 3, and some people are bumping up the Urgula to 2s as well. That is entirely up to you. The reason that people are doing that is because you need to have a Dracotail name in the hand alongside the Feymana, so you're trying to increase your consistency, and the added effects of Pan and Urgula are both really, really important. So just like the Mululu, where it can non-target negate a monster effect on the field, the Urgula has the added benefit of being able to non-target destroy a spell or trap on the field, and the Pan has the added ability to be able to non-target destroy a monster on the field. So it's really kind of cool and ways of being able to disrupt your opponent even further, which is why these are being considered to be played at a higher level. In places of the additional copies of this, I have gone for King of the Swamps because I am on the hybrid and I'm also on the Tearlament. So if you're not on a hybrid version, that's when you might start to look at something more along the Blazing Cartasia. It is also something you might want to be looking for towards maxing out your Pans or bumping up your Pans and your Urgulas and everything else in betweens. For the Tearlament monsters, this is why it's like a very, very small engine, because the only amount of Tearlaments that you need to affect the main deck is just one of each of the names. So 1 Havnis, 1 Shiren, and 1 Merly. Now, the reason that I am not playing Rhino Heart in this one is because I am playing the King of the Swamp. Now, the reason I felt that the King of Swamp was going to be better is because it was a bit more versatile. Yes, your Rhino Heart as a normal summon was absolutely fine, because a normal summon it, I send the Tearlaments from the deck to the grave. The only downside is that when you're doing something like that, you're not really able to add anything to your field because you're not really able to go into much more else. Yes, of course, you could try and look at stuff like maybe mud dragons are down the route, depending on what attributes you have available to you. But it was kind of a starter that needed more of a setup. And I also found that through testing, if I opened up with the Rhino Heart and a Lucias, I would be a little bit torn and I'd want to focus on the Lucias. And then when I was trying to use Rhino Heart as the fusion material, it didn't really get me anywhere because it was like the only benefit of using it as a named material is to work your way into the Kaleido Heart, and King of the Swamp did that job anyway, while also then being able to utilize itself as the Tearlaments kit Kalos to go into the Rue Kalos and then double up as Dark Magician for the Red Eyes Dark Dragoon. So King of the Swamp kind of provides you with a bit more versatility. The fact that it can also be discarded to grab you a polymerization means you had another layer of being able to fuse. And what I found during more testing and more duels is that when your opponent stops a Ketu, if you're going second, when they stop the Rahu, when they stop the Feymena, or when they stop any one of those, you're then down an ability to fuse, and you kind of want to be able to maximize your ability to fuse where at all possible. And that's where the King of the Swamp into polymerization became really, really helpful, because even if you open up multiple King of the Swamps, you still have that option. And the added benefit when you are looking at the Tearlaments version of this one is that you have the King of the Swamp being a Aqua. So we are playing 3 King of the Swamp. I've pretty much already talked about King of the Swamp and the polymerization. So I'm going to go back onto the Shiren, Havnis, and Merly. Now, at the exact moment in time, all of these cards are limited to 1. So you can only play 1 of each copy. If you could play more of them, of course you'd be playing more of them, but the way that they work is if they are sent to the graveyard via card effect, you get to fusion summon using the specific monster. So if the Merly is sent, you have to use the Merly, and then the other materials by putting them back to the bottom of the deck, which is really, really important. You can only use the effect once per turn. The Shiren gives you the ability to discard a card from the hand to then summon itself down and then send the top 3 cards of your deck to the graveyard. The Havnis is when your opponent activates a monster effect, you get a quick effect to special on this card from hand and then send the top 3. And then Merly is a normal summon to send the top 3. Now, you're not going to be using any of those effects, or really rarely should you ever need to do that. The mill can sometimes be quite helpful if you're able to get the effects off. And what I mean by that is, if my opponent activates a monster effect and I'm like, I need more materials in my graveyard to set up my Havnis, or I want to run the risk that I hit a King of the Swamp off of the mills, you'll probably go, cool, activate the Havnis, summon it down, use the effect to mill the 3, and then you still have your Feymena to utilize this effect to fuse it off. So that's the only times you'd probably consider the mill effects of these cards, but you're not really using them in a traditional Tearlament style where you want the mills to then lead you to more mills. You're trying to utilize them to go, Havnis, if I get lucky and hit a Shiren and Merly, happy days. If I hit a King of the Swamp, even better, because then it means that my fusion plays off of the back of using Havnis as material is going to be that 1 layer more. The only other reason that you wouldn't want to use the Havnis specifically from the field is because when you're going turn 0, if you're using the materials in the hand, your Arfulion is going to get the ability to target 2 cards rather than just the 1 or as many more you're going to use. So if you already have that monster on the field, you're not really getting everything you need to. Another thing that is very, very important to remember as well is that with your Dracotail monsters, they need a Dracotail monster and then a monster in the hand. So if your Havnis is the monster on the field, your Dracotail monster is the monster in the hand. So you still need 1 more monster. So ultimately it ends up increasing your combo limit, which is really, really restrictive when you're already going to be going, cool, I've got 5 cards in my hand. Feymena is going to be one of them. Then I'm going to be using the Havnis that I've put onto the field, backed up by a Dracotail monster and then another name. Like, you burn through your hand very, very quickly. Yes, of course, your Arfulion will then allow you to add 2 of them back, but you'd much rather use the Havnis in the hand with a Dracotail monster to kind of save you as much resource as possible. And then, of course, like I've already mentioned, King of the Swamp and polymerization. Then onto the hand traps. Now, there is some additional synergies with one of the hand traps I'm going to talk about now. So one of the hand traps that gives you a little bit more additional synergy is your Mulchummy Perulia. Now, the reason this gives you more synergy is because it is an Aqua, so that when you're trying to go into your Kaleido Heart, you could actually shuffle this back into the deck. Not saying that that's what you want to do, but it is one of them options that you're like, oh, I need an additional Aqua monster to get into my Kaleido Heart. I'm actually going to be able to utilize this. It's also one of the ones that I find really fascinating, because what I like about it is if you were to go second, for example, or even if you go first, for example, and you see a Perulia, you're now in a position where you could very easily go, cool, I'm always going to trigger the K9 effects. If my opponent is on K9s, they will always summon the K9. So what you have the ability for is go, okay, cool, draw phase, activate my own Perulia. Yes, I put my hand limit back down to 4, but I've activated my own Perulia. So then once I start to make my plays, if my opponent does decide to go for a Izuna, I'll get the draw off the Prulia, and then as I'm making my plays, I can also put the Prulia back into the deck to work my way into a Kaleido Heart. So there's kind of these ways where it can be quite useful for you in some niche scenarios, and it means that you don't mind discarding it because you'll be able to utilize it as fusion material later on through the Tearlament kind of section. Of course, if you're going to be playing Prulia, you are going to want to be playing your Fualos, backed up by 3 Ash Blossoms. Adapt your hand traps to the environment and what you have access to. I decided to main 2 Ghost Bell and 2 Nibiru. It is a 42 card deck. If you want to cut it down to a 40 card deck, you could take out 2 of the monsters should you wish, or you can swap them out for Ghost Ogres, you can swap them out for DD Crows, Bystials if you wanted to. You've got a couple of different variants. Onto the spells, we are on 3 Rahu Dragontail. Absolutely incredible card, being able to utilize the hand and deck for a fusion summon of a Dracotail monster. This does lock you into fusion summon, and there's only 2 cards in our extra deck that we worry about locking ourselves into fusion materials, but more times than not, you'll be only summoning them during very specific scenarios, so it's something you shouldn't need to worry about as heavily. 3 Ketu Dracotail. Pretty standard on this one. The other added benefit that I love about this card is being able to kind of, when your opponent puts a monster on the field, you then get the ability to fuse with this card as well, which is why I was highly considering playing the K9 package on top of it, but I felt if you were playing the K9 package plus a Tearlament package, you're really restricting your deck. Then I do still like to play 3 Super Polarization. I know that this is a bit of a questionable card for some players. I am playing like 3 targets in the extra deck. I just like it. I think it's one of the best breakers right now because your opponent cannot respond to it. It allows you to deal with both Snatchy and the Herald of the Art Light. It then gives you a monster that can choose to be targeted protected, and all of your other monsters can be targeted protected. And that just gives you another layer that really makes it a bit awkward in the Yummy matchup. It's also great in the mirror matchup because you can work your way into the Secturion Dragon, which is going to lock your opponent down completely. It's also good in the Blue Eyes matchup. The Vanquish Soul matchup can get a little bit awkward, so could a Fiendsmith variant, but that's also why I am playing, as a bit of a preview, the 1 Magistus Torozo. Now, on the back of the Magistus Torozo, another variant that I'm really looking forward to actually finally play now is going to be the Magistus version of this deck, which I'll hopefully be able to do once we here in Europe get Battles of Legend coming out this week. Carrying on for the last 2 cards of the deck, we've got 1 Flame and 1 Horn, for the pure fact that, you know, these are pretty stable. Like, there's no reason not to be playing those cards. As painful as it may be to hard open these because they're not a monster, they can't facilitate your plays. It's also another bit of an added benefit of a 42 card deck is that you've kind of shrunk them down a little bit, but it's not the end of the world, and they're cards that you set. And the biggest bit of advice that I can give you that I received from a video on YouTube, I was just watching it, and they said the best bit of advice I could give you is when you're utilizing your traps, make sure that the second one always recycles the first one and then back and forth. So more times than not, when you're finishing your turn, you should have both of these in play. And then what you need to make sure is when you activate the first one, for example, Flame, you put any of your Dracotail monsters back from the deck, or even your Rahu Dragontails and Ketus back into the deck and draw a card. But then when you activate Horn, always make sure that the target it is recycling is going to be the Flame, because then later on in the turn, once you start to enter the grind state, you can then go, cool, set the Flame. Activate the Flame, put the Horn back, set the Horn, and vice versa, and go round and round and round. So that's it for the entire main deck. Now to move on to the extra deck. So for the extra deck, we'll talk about the Tearlament monsters and ultimately bridge into the cards that can also be used off of the back of the King of the Swamp. So the first Tearlament monster we're going to talk about is the Rukalos. So this requires specifically Tearlament's Kit Kalos, which is banned, but the King of the Swamp acts as that name, which is why you can still utilize this, plus a Tearlament's monster. And then benefit of this one is other aqua monsters you control cannot be destroyed by battle. You can only use each of the following effects once per turn. When your opponent activates a card or effect that includes an effect that special summons a monster, quick effect. So you've got Nibiru, you've got the Yummies, you've got Holly Sue, you've got Azuna. Really, really great options on this one. You get to negate the activation, and if you do, destroy it. Then you send a Tearlament's card from the hand or face up from the field, including itself, to the graveyard. If this fusion summon card is sent to the graveyard via card effect, you get to special summon it back. So it sets up the material it needs for itself to send, and when it sends itself, it brings itself straight back, so you've got that protection ready to go during your turn as well. The aggressive counterpart to the Rukalos is going to be the Kaleido Heart. Now this specifically needs Rhino Heart, and again that's where King of the Swamp comes into play, plus 2 Aqua monsters. The other downside of it is that King of the Swamp is your Aqua monster as well, so that's where having a Rhino Heart will be quite beneficial, but then that's also where the Prulia fits in that slot, because to make this card, you're going to need King of the Swamp plus 2 Aquas, which is usually going to be 2 Tearlament names, or is going to need to be a Prulia or a second King of the Swamp with a Tearlament. So it can't be used as fusion material. If this card is special summoned or an aqua monster is sent to your graveyard via card effect while this card is on the field, you get to target one card your opponent controls and shuffle it into the deck. If this card is sent to the graveyard via a card effect, you get to special summon this card, and if you do send a Tearlament card from the deck to the grave. Added benefit of being able to send a Tearlament card from the deck to the grave is that then sets you up another fusion play. The other card that we're going to be utilising King of the Swamp is, of course, the Red Eyes Dark Dragoon. And as I mentioned, if you're utilising King of the Swamp, it subs itself in the hand as Dark Magician. So as long as you're using a dragon effect monster, you can work your way into this. In very, very weird scenarios, you would need another way of being able to get the Tearlament in the grave, because obviously you can't use a Tearlament to make this. But there are ways where you go, cool, I've got Dragoon, I can use the Tearlament later on in the fusion play and then work your way into Rukalos. So there's ways of being able to get two of these on the field, which is just absolutely insane and incredibly aggressive. The more kind of common one that you'll probably make off of the back of anything with involving your Tearlaments will be your Dracotail, which is why I'm going to be playing two of this. But the whole idea behind this one is that you would activate very standardly, you'd activate your Dracotail Feymana plus a Dracotail monster in the hand and then a Tearlament monster. So any of your Tearlament monsters in hand, happy days. That would then summon Arfulion. You would then go Chain Link 1 Arfulion, target 2 cards. Ideally in this scenario, one in your opponent's graveyard and your Feymana, but if you want to, you can also target your other Dracotail monster you've just used as fusion material. Chainlink 2 could then be the Tearlament monster to be able to fusion summon. Chainlink 3 will then be your other Dracotail monster to set a card from deck to the field. So you'd set any of the traps or any of the spells, whichever you want. Then you would resolve the Tearlaments monster in the graveyard to put the Arfulion back into the extra deck, and then put the Tearlaments monster in the graveyard back into the deck to fusion summon out a Dracotail. And then you'd resolve the Arfulion to then add the cards back from the grave to the hand. So you've recycled your resource, you've turned your Arfulion into a Dracotail. So rather than just having an Arfulion sitting there saying, right, destroy me, put me into the graveyard, and then I'll be able to come back when two monsters are sent to the graveyard at the same time, you kind of go with the Dracotail instead, and that gives you another layer of disruption. Speaking of two Arfulion, because of the Tearlaments package, we're going to be able to recycle this a lot quicker and a lot easier, which is going to be very, very effective for you. Then we have two of the Gulamel. I'm still waiting to get my supers through the post, so I really hope they do turn up soon. Again, pretty standard on this one. This is another one that you can make with your Feymana if you want to be a bit more aggressive, and then also be able to dodge some of the targeted effects, which could be quite useful for you with your Tearlament monsters. Then we've got the one Septirion Dragon, Mud Dragon, Chorozo, and Garura for your Super Poly targets. And then the final two cards that aren't fusion monsters, but they can very easily become fusion monsters if you want them to be, is the one SP Little Knight and the Super Star Slayer Typhon, just as your utility cards. Now, this is where it gets very, very interesting when you're trying to put this build together, because if you are a fan of the Canines and you have access to the Canines, you can take out 3 of your Super Polys. Straight away, when you take out 3 of the Super Polys, you can then take out your Mud Dragon, your Garura, and your Magister's Chorozo, and that becomes a Ripper. It could then become any other rank 5 you want. So it could be Nash Knight plus a C104, a C101, entirely up to you. The number card that you'll need to attach to it. So a 104 or a 101. So you've got that option to flex those out should you want to. And then you've got your Azuna in the main deck for you as another layer of a hand trap. It's also another monster, so you're swapping your Super Polys, which is a spell that doesn't help facilitate your fusion plays, for another monster that does. So there's lots of pros and cons to how you want to shake it around and how you'd want to change it about. But what I do like about this is it just gives you a little bit extra of fun that I haven't seen anyone put together. Like, I haven't seen anyone try and play a Dracotail Tearlament list. I know it's only a very small Tearlament list, and I'm still trying to iron out the fine-tuned moments on this one to get the max value out of it. But I still think it's a really kind of cool option that can really catch your opponent off guard, and it can also give you another layer that a lot of people are not going to be expecting. Anyway, hope this has given you a couple of ideas on an updated version of your own build. Let me know what other variants you are playing for the Dracotails. I just love how varied it already is. And I've already mentioned this before, I just love decks in general that can be as varied as this. So when you're able to utilize it with Branded, Pure, Canine, Dark Magician, Blue Eyes, you name it, this deck just has so many different versatilities. It's really, really cool. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, share. Till next time, as absolutely always, stay safe and of course, happy dueling.